Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on exploring the evidence for health system sustainability planning and achieving results at scale. Before we begin today, I'm going to take you all through a few quick WebEx logistics. There are two recommended ways to connect to audio. You can use your computer audio, as well as the WebEx Call Me feature to receive an automated call from WebEx. We will be looking out for questions and comments throughout today's discussion, so please use the chat panel to submit those questions. You can use the drop-down menu to send either your question or comment directly to all panelists or to everyone. Lastly, we want to reiterate that you use the closed captioning toggle button to view or hide captions and to change it to any other language other than English. So please use that view hide captions to click the closed caption button on the lower left-hand side of your screen at any point during today's webinar. And at this point in time, I'm going to pass things over to Ekpenyong Ekanum to get us started with today's webinar.
Great. Thank you so much there, Mariam. And welcome everyone to this episode, if I may say, our second webinar in the series for the Evidence Gap Map, achieving results, sustainability planning and achieving results at scale. We do have a very packed agenda today, and what we hope to be a very interesting session. This is essentially the agenda that, as you can see on the slide here, where we would be getting into a quick audience poll. But before we go any further, my name is Ekpenyong Ekanum, a public health physician and the director for planning, performance, and learning on the local health system sustainability project. And I will be, steering the ship today at taking us through all the great presentations and discussions that we're going to have on this subject. We've looked forward to this session for a while now, and we are so glad that you have taken the time to join us this bright and early morning here on the East Coast. So just going back to the agenda here, we are going to be going through a quick poll so that we can get a sense of what your expectations are and your current engagement with the Evidence Gap Map resource that we've had on for several months now. And as part of USAID's health systems learning agenda and the new vision for 2030 for health system strengthening, we're going to have a little recap on how this particular resource is positioned to accelerate or to amplify all the efforts so far on the learning agenda. We're going to do a very quick demo of the actual resource so that those of you that may not have had the opportunity to play with it, so to speak, will have the chance to see how it works. And then we're going to dive into some summary, very brief summary presentation of what the current synthesis of the evidence gap for this particular learning question does say. Right after that, we're going to listen to some case presentations, which will dive a little bit deeply into some of the points that we are already seeing in the literature, so to speak, exemplifying some of the main ideas and themes that we have around this topic. And then we're going to have a nice expert reflection, moderated roundtable discussion where we try to do our best to identify a few experts or actually folks that have had some experience trying to grapple with this very knotty issue of sustainability, health system sustainability planning. And then we'll open it up to the audience Q&A. So we have a very rich and allotted a sizable portion of this discussion this morning or this afternoon, evening, wherever you are, into Q&A. So we're really hoping that all through this entire 80 to 90-minute session that you are engaging with us, you are sending your questions in the chat, you are even if possible as well, sending in comments, because we know you are already also have experiences with this as much as possible. So thank you so much. Just wanted to run through this ride right now and go into the actual session for the day. So real quick, there's going to be poll questions that will pop up in the chat. You would look to your either your upper right or lower right, depending on how things are oriented. But you should be able to see a chat pop up real quick, and then you want to go through the chat and answer the following questions. So yeah, I see that pop up on my screen. It's gonna be on for a few minutes, but so these are the poll questions per se. What one factor do you consider to be the greatest priority to ensure sustainability and scale in health system programming? And then we have a couple of options there for you to just select. But if you notice, it's what one factor. So please take your time and select the one most critical, one most important, or the one that kind of keeps you up at night, if that's if you are really neck deep into all of this. What do you consider to be the greatest priority to ensure sustainability and scale in health system programming? Is it learning? Is it adapting, or the whole CLA idea, or is it just the collaborating and the collaborating piece? There's also political will and government buy-in. Or if you are just like, well, all of the above, I don't know, just select the right answer there for the first poll. So I can see right now that we have at least the running number of about 24, 25 people have already answered. Yeah, and then we do have a second question. If you did answer other, please just type in your answer very briefly. If you think there's something else that you consider that we don't have here, maybe it's just something else. I don't know. I'm thinking of an answer now. But if you think other is if there's something else that is really burning, just please write the answer in there, and then we can go in. Just note to self, we do have uh, there's opportunity to include smileys as well into your typed answer. Don't forget that that's also an option there in this day and age. So we have almost 50 people already respond there. Let me give it another 10 or so more seconds, and then we move to the next question. And then just so that we are ready, we're going to kind of move to the next question there. So the next question does say, what do you hope to take away from this session? You know, um, what do you hope to take away from this session? Yeah, and some of you may have noticed the pop-up there for the second question. What do you hope to take away from this session? Should be up there now. Evidence to support sustainability and scale, country experiences and lessons learned, sustainability, scale, priorities to target in my work, enablers, barriers for government institutionalization or donor-funded programming. In this particular question as well, we just want the one most important thing that really captures what you hope to take away. We know that all answers are possible. Some of you want to take away all four, but we just want the best one that you think might be reflective of what you really want to. Some of that information is. Oh yeah, somebody has typed into the chat. Thank you so much. I'll probably vote in your stead right here, Pavers, and select that one option. So, and then those of you that are voting, once you click send response, you'll probably be able to see the answers right away. But it's just to give us a sense of what a lot of people are what your thoughts are. All right, so once we get to the critical mass, the critical number here, I would close the poll and then we can get right into the discussion for the day. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating. We have about nearly 60 people. Once we hit a certain critical number, we will go into it. And the time stops now. Great, thank you so much. All right, so very quickly, just before we just to get into some of the meat right now, I'm just going to hand it over to Nitu Hariharan, Health System Strengthening Advisor at USAID, to kind of go through what HSS, the whole HSS agenda and the Office of Health Systems in USAID, they're some of the priorities and the why and how of this entire effort to pull together the evidence gap map. So Nitu, over to you.
Thank you, Ekming. Welcome again, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. As Ekling Yong said, my name is Neetu Hariharan, and I'm a Health System Strengthening Advisor with USAID's Office of Health Systems. Our office provides technical assistance and guidance to our health system strengthening programs worldwide. And we work in close partnership with many of you joining us today to advance a shared approach to health system strengthening. We're really excited for today's event. This is the 6th in our 2023 HSS Learning Series, an effort of the Office of Health Systems to better share and apply HSS evidence to inform our collective efforts to support sustainable health system strengthening. The field of health system strengthening and USAID's health system strengthening activities continue to evolve, making this a much needed opportunity to reflect on new evidence needs, current priorities, and renewed strategic directions. So our goal for the series of events is really meant to help meet current needs for more knowledge exchange and learning related to health system strengthening. Next slide, please. USAID uses this visual description to show the framework for our health system strengthening vision 2030. You can see here where learning and adaptation fit into the vision. Improving health outcomes is at the center of everything we do. And as with the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated, those improvements that we have worked so hard for are fragile without strong health systems. And then we have the specific outcomes that our health system strengthening work strives to achieve. First, which is equity, which is achieving the reaching underserved and vulnerable populations with essential services. Quality, ensuring that services that we're providing need to be of quality and the system itself needs to be high quality to support those services. And resource optimization, that resources need to be aligned to achieve those goals. Resource optimization is not just financial resources, but it includes human resources as well as drugs and supplies and other. Throughout all of our work, we want to make sure that there is continuous learning and adaptation, both to grow and advance the field of health systems itself and to continue monitor, adjust, and adapt our approaches based on changing assumptions, new opportunities, or real experience on what is working and what is not working. And lastly, we aim to design our health system strengthening activities with certain key features which are necessary for health systems to be resilient and achieve sustainable health outcomes that promote country self-reliance over donor dependency. Next slide, please. Accompanying the 2030 vision, the Health System Strengthening Learning Agenda serves as a collaborative platform for continuous health system strengthening learning and adaptation, and was built on and continues previous evidence and learning efforts supported by the Office of Health Systems. The learning agenda is organized around 6 questions that were developed through contributions from many in the HSS community, which likely includes many of you on today's call. With this learning agenda, we aim to improve HSS programming by updating or generating, synthesizing, and disseminating evidence related to key HSS evidence needs. The evidence will also inform design and management of USAID's health system strengthening strategies, programs, projects, and activities under the vision for health system strengthening. Next slide, please. So on this slide is where you can see the 6 learning questions, which span in focus from applying a systems practice approach to how to work across multiple health system strengthening areas and with new partners to create high-performing health systems. The questions involve the full range of health system actors, the organizations and people responsible for the health system strengthening, including government bodies, health providers, civil society and private sector actors, academic institutions, communities, households, and individuals. Next slide, please. Thank you. The specific focus of this deep dive discussion will be on question 2, which aims to explore the conditions or factors that facilitate the institutionalization and scale up of good practices that improve health system outcomes and extract the lessons learned regarding planning for and achieving results at scale. Next slide, please. So in support of the learning agenda and hosting this deep dive discussion today, USAID's local health system sustainability project conducted a comprehensive mapping exercise to collate and curate available relevant evidence for each of the 6 learning questions and identify opportunities to continue strengthening the evidence base. The resulting evidence gap maps are publicly available and free to use. So now I would like to turn it over to Kara to take us through a quick demonstration of the maps before we start the panel discussion. So thank you all again, and looking forward to the rich discussion.
Thanks so much, Neetu. Hi, everyone. My name is Kara Thompson. I am an analyst on the Local Health System Sustainability Project, and I'll be giving a very brief demo of our evidence gap map. This has been live for a couple months now, so you might have had a chance to view it at this point, but if not, we have a couple new exciting features to share. So someone from our team will also share a direct link to the tool, but I also wanted to give a brief demonstration how to access it. So this lives on the LHSS website under the Resource Center. When you get to this page, you can either type Evidence Gap Map into the search bar or select the tool option here, and it should be the first option that pops up. So this is the page of our actual Evidence Gap Map toolkit. It's split kind of into 2 pieces. So this first half is the actual tool itself. You can see the selection of the learning questions and the actual table gap map. And if you scroll down just a bit, you'll see the second half that details more information about the gap map, the methodology, how to navigate, and more that I'll get into in just a bit. So starting at the top of how to actually navigate and use our gap map, the first thing you'll want to do is at the very top of the screen, select one of our 6 learning questions. We previously only had 4 live, and now we're happy to share we have all 6, so you're welcome to explore those. And for the sake of this demo, I'll just select learning question 1 on systems thinking. So you'll see that this blue box below will list the full learning question, and if you scroll down just a bit, you'll see the full gap map. So each gap map for each learning question is organized into rows and columns. The rows of equity, quality, resource optimization, and resilience are standardized across all of the learning questions. So you'll see that those will remain the same according to USAID's health priority outcomes. When it comes to columns, those are a bit tweaked per learning question depending on what we found in our actual review of the literature for each learning question. So if you toggle between a couple, you'll see that they change just a bit. So back to learning question 1. You're able to click on a cell specific to what you're interested in using the evidence gap map for. And once you click on the cell, you'll see the specific learning articles and blogs and different literature that we found pertaining to this applicable row and column. And you can also see the cells that have the highest number of articles have this kind of deeper shade to the box, and vice versa, the cells with the least amount of articles have a lighter shade, and this is sort of a visual representation of the actual gaps that we've found in the literature. So if you want to have an even deeper look into how to filter, we have this filter option here. You're able to click and see the different filters that we currently have available. These range from country, date range, health outcomes, etc. And this is pretty easy to use. Again, for the sake of the demo, I'll just select I'm interested in the Africa region, and I'm interested in, let's say, human resources for health. And you'll press update, and the map will really focus in and hone down from the larger amount of numbers that we had before. And if you want to go back to the main page, you'll click filter again, clear filters, update, and the page will return back to the full map. So we're hoping this is pretty user-friendly. Again, feel free to take a look at this page and click around and become familiar with it and explore our new learning questions 4 and 6. I also wanted to highlight farther down on the page, again, we have information about the evidence gap map, some more information on our methodology and the 4 high-level steps that we use. These include running search terms in PubMed and other websites for title and abstract screening, a second round of screening to ensure agreement on relevance and our inclusion criteria, full text reviews and tagging according to our predefined filters, and then finally a validation stage. We also have some more information on how to navigate, which is how I just described the demo. And we also have links to our 2-page technical brief learning products. We currently have 4 live and are working on the additional 2 for learning questions 4 and 6. You're able to click on each of these and learn a little bit more about the key findings and key themes and gaps in literature that we found for each learning question, and we'll get into that in detail in just a minute. And finally, the last feature on this page I wanted to highlight is the How to Contribute section. So as you're going through the evidence gap map, if you find that you are aware of an article or a piece of literature that you think would be relevant to one or more of the learning questions and you don't currently see it in our evidence gap map, you're welcome to submit that through this Google form, and our team will review it and will be able to incorporate it into the actual gap map itself. So we're hoping this is a collaborative process. So now I will pass it over to my colleague Minyote, who will go into a little bit more depth about the 2-pager technical brief that I just mentioned, and specifically more on our learning question 2 findings for sustainability and scale.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. My name is Minyote Haile, and I work with Kara and Ed Pingong on the LHSS Evidence Gap Map activity. I'm going to pick up right where Kara left off to share a bit more about what these learning products are, and with a specific focus on the high-level findings that emerged for the sustainability and scale question. Just to give you a bit more context on this product, these products are 2-pager briefs that share our characterization of the evidence and are intended to be a starting point for users who want to get a sense of what we found for each of the learning questions before or after delving into the detailed articles. So the slide that you see here captures how the 2-pagers are structured. They all have a similar formatting, and they all have that graphic you see on the right side to present information on the type and level of evidence we found. So by that, I mean, for example, it captures how many articles had quantitative evidence versus qualitative, the number and type of study designs we came across as we were collating these articles, what health functions the articles mostly focused on, and which regions were represented in the evidence that we found. So things like that too, with the intent of fully capturing the full spectrum of the existing evidence. Next slide, please. So now I wanted to go into the high-level findings that emerged for our learning question of the day on sustainability and scale. And for some of the higher themes that came out, we found that buy-in and ownership by local stakeholders came across very strongly in most of our articles as a key facilitating factors for sustainability and implementation at scale. There were also several articles that discussed the importance of contextual readiness as a consideration for scale up. And relatedly to that, there was a lot of discussion around governance and different governance structures that need to be part of the planning for sustainability and scale. Another health system function that came out strongly is also human resources for health, especially in the context of availability and capacity when, again, planning for scale. Going a little bit into the gaps, one of the gaps we noticed among the evidence is what has been working well for mobilizing domestic resources to sustainably support scale up of proven interventions. We also found there was limited articles around outcome and impact evaluation of scale up and sustainability strategies. There were some process evaluation articles, but much less so for outcome and impact. There are more themes in the gaps, more themes and gaps in the learning product that is available on the LHSS website, and we'll be sure to circulate the link with you all. For now, I'm going to stop here and want to transition us to our pre-recorded case studies that will share practical examples that echo some of these findings and more. Thank you.
Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody. I am Paulina Justi. I am Chief of Party of LHSS Peru, and we are going to talk today about the collaborative work we have done to support migrants with HIV to access comprehensive care. First thing of all is that diagnosis and treatment of HIV is free for everyone, regardless of migratory status. However, in a health system assessment we conducted a couple of years ago, it was evident that migrants who have been diagnosed with HIV still need to pay for other services like laboratory services before starting ART and other health services as specialist visits or treatment for complications if they don't have health insurance. We have found that that could represent for a migrant 2 or 3 weeks of work. So it's a big economic barrier. No, we found that from migrants receiving ART in the country, only 3% were registered on the public health insurance. The objective we were looking for was applying a long-term and system-level approach to address the significant economic barrier to comprehensive care for migrants living with HIV. So what did we do? We leverage the health system assessment collaboration with other institutions. We convened several organizations to monitor with us the health system assessment. We presented the methodology, presented the results to them, discussed the recommendations, and during this process, we invited them to participate in a health system mapping exercise where we found the levers that can move the problems we found. And one of that levers was facilitating access to public health insurance. So we decided to engage these people to advocate for a bill that would allow migrants with HIV or TB access public health insurance. We engaged champions from several sectors. We engaged politicians, NGOs, international cooperation agencies, community leaders, and we worked in 3 areas: the bill development and update, advocacy, and communications. All of these efforts, well, about 1.5 years, resulted in a draft bill that was already presented to Peru Congress in June this year through a well-known congresswoman. Since then, we have been supporting the process after the bill is presented, like obtaining a parallel opinion from several government institutions. So we targeted and engaged stakeholders from the start of the project. We have, I could say, a core group at the beginning, and then they involve other stakeholders in different areas. So we can see here all the stakeholders involved. We have United Nations agencies, we have international NGOs, we have local NGOs, we have the Ombudsman Office, the academia, no? And we established roles and responsibilities to leverage its member expertise, the networks and position in the health system. We set up a clear goal, and we still meet periodically to evaluate progress and plan next steps. We prepare minutes and distribute them to all partners so that they can stay engaged and informed. And as you know, we have a huge political instability and high turnover of officials. So this collaboration align interests and facilitate sustained momentum and continuity, with partners being committed to maintain the advocacy for this goal. No, what have we learned? We utilize a whole society approach to identify and engage organizations, to leaders, the media, other system member advocates with a shared vision throughout the activity. This has improved the quality and local ownership of the work and enabled collaboration. We have worked with evidence-informed and data-driven approaches to support the bill. We have done estimations of budget that will be needed by the public health insurance. It only represents a 0.03% increase, and we compare this with the cost of not implementing it. So, and the balance was clearly favoring including the migrants in the insurance. And we have collaborated closely and systematically with local actors, and these facilitate alliances for policy change in this case and other future actions. Looking ahead in the future, this strategy should be incorporated in this type of collaboration in future health system strengthening activities. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
My name is Lukweshanu. I'm the Health System and Governance Advisor at USAID Health Finance Improvement Program. My presentation is on institutionalization of healthcare financing reforms in Ethiopia. Just to give you some highlight on the reform, Ethiopia has been implementing healthcare financing reform since 1998, when the healthcare financing strategy was endorsed. Afterwards, the reform is implemented sequentially. The reform that is being implemented at the public health facilities on the supply side is the first generation reform. And various USAID projects have been supporting the government of Ethiopia in implementing the healthcare financing reform for more than 20 years. But since 2018, the focus of the support was fully shifted towards institutionalizing the reform activities in 6 regions and 2 city administrations, where the reform implementation is found to have been matured. The challenges that led to institutionalization was that reforms in these regions were partially institutionalized. So the counterparts were dependent on USAID projects, supports for technical assistance and capacity building activities. Thus, the program designed institutionalizing the reform activities with the aim of transitioning program-based supports to government-owned implementations. And accordingly, interventions were designed by the program to provide technical assistance to complete this industrialization process. To industrialize the reform in a sustainable manner, the program collaborated with the Ministry of Health in developing a plan for industrialization of the first generation reform in 6 regions and 2 city administrations. And this plan clearly specified the action steps required, the timelines, the roles and responsibilities, the financing sources, and the monitoring arrangements. It also clarified the system elements to be put in place in order to facilitate the industrialization process. So the system elements that were designed at the beginning of the program were the establishment of organizational structure, updating of operational procedures, strengthening of capacity building activities, and establishing and operationalization of healthcare financing technical working groups in the regions. The results gained in these efforts are shown here. To mention some of them, for instance, in the case of organizational structure, more than 1,500 positions were created at different levels. And in the case of capacity building, 171 facilitators were provided with TOT, and a pool of these trainers were established in the regions and city administrations. The program supported Ministry of Health to communicate this plan with regions and city administrations for their awareness and action. And it also advocated to build consensus on the need for industrialization at different levels, at the health facility level, at the district level, and at the regional health bureau level, and at the zonal level. So in order to do that, the program aligned its institutionalization and transitioning plan with the Ministry of Health and Regional Health Bureau's annual plan. And it supported the integration of institutionalization costs into the budget plan of these regions and city administrations. So costs like hiring of personnel, implementation of the reform, and conducting of monitoring were reflected in the annual plans of these regions and city administrations. The important lessons we have learned as a result of industrialization practice are: the first one is government ownership and leadership. Government counterparts need to lead the industrialization process. And stakeholder engagement in buy-in is also another important element or lesson we have learned. So government counterparts alignment and their buy-in at different levels are helpful to achieve the objective of institutionalization. Strategic timing and alignment is also a critical element. So it is important to align strategies, plans, and interventions in order for these strategies to work well for institutionalization purpose. So in the case of capacity building activities, for instance, our program aligned the capacity building activities with the continuing professional development program of the Ministry of Health. And in addition to that, institutionalization came at the right time when regions and city administrations were ready and willing to own the reform activities and lead them independently. And in addition to that, it's also important to have a clear vision and to have a well-defined process of institutionalization. So from the very beginning, institutionalization was considered as a priority element by USAID projects. So building on this, the program developed internal action plan, which highlights transition activities, timelines, expected outcomes, and monitoring mechanisms, which help us to track the process, the progress of institutionalization. These are very important pointers. So this action plan helps the program staff to have shared understanding and provide the support consistently across regions and city administrations. Thank you so much for your attention.
Now we have the last presentation from Christian Connections for International Health.
Thank you for having me today. I'm Doug Fountain, Executive Director for Christian Connections for International Health. I'll be sharing lessons for scale and sustainability based on our 30 by 30 Health Systems Initiative. CCIH is a global network with over 100 organizations and hundreds of individuals who collectively work in over 90 countries. The 30 by 30 Health Systems Initiative is a 10-year CCIH effort to strengthen 30 health systems in which faith-based organizations operate by 2030. Right now, we're in year 4, and already 36 faith-based organizations have made formal long-term commitments to CCIH, to each other, and to their local health system to work to improve one or more functions of their local health systems by 2030. Of these 36 faith-based organizations, 9 made multi-country commitments, 17 in sub-Saharan Africa, 7 in Asia, 2 in Latin America. Half of all of our commitment makers are local organizations who work in a single country. Already, these commitment makers have made a difference. For example, they report providing over 4,600 training sessions that have reached over 33,000 health workers and strengthened health services for 1.3 million people. These commitments are truly local. They're not externally planned or funded. We didn't start with a large foundation grant or a donor fund. We started by asking what difference we can make through our members in our network. So how do we plan for sustainability? This effort is different in that we're not trying to continue something that we started, but rather we're assembling organizations who commit to change. Commitments have become the bedrock of this initiative and the gateway to sustainability. Of course, to reach that, commitment makers had to reach a long-term vision. They had to gain the confidence of their organization boards and leadership to sensitize stakeholders, especially since this isn't coming as an externally funded program. When you imagine what can be done with limited resources, it creates new avenues of creativity. Some are doing better at mobilizing resources, and that creates good learning for the others. Planning also means building accountability. We created a monitoring and reporting plan with a standard set of indicators. We have a large list of possible indicators, but we mandate reporting on a few. This way, all keep up with each other's progress. That gets to the last element of planning, adaptive learning through peer exchanges. We create the forum for commitment makers to share their experience. In fact, we have a session coming up in 2 weeks to discuss advocacy, leveraging from each other's experience to advocate for resources and a conducive environment. We've learned a lot from this effort, and we have 3 takeaways for you. First, core elements of organization capacity are vital for success and sustainability. In fact, in our original needs assessment, members noted that someone could give them $2 million But without a good board in place or without good governance, there's no assurance that we would see the desired results. I think we've underestimated the need for practical help, not just assessments, but access to consultants and coaching and training to help with things like governance, business development, and communications. For this reason, CCIH started doing business development training this year and will run a virtual learning institute on that starting in October. Second, there's power in networks. Rather than focusing on a single organization to implement a large program, many organizations working in complementarity generates learning. But there is more than that. We can see consortia starting to form around key topics where we can aid local efforts with very focused and targeted grants. This type of thinking is what's also behind the success of large faith-based health associations, such as the Christian Health Association of Kenya and many others, that oversee hundreds and hundreds of facilities. We should think more in terms of networks. And finally, there needs to be a clear champion who's committed or driven to scale. We see natural leaders step up, who see the vision and bring together partners and resources. We've also seen the downside of a single person when a few organizations have discontinued commitments, largely because of restructuring to move the champion out of their role. For this last point, we think it's important to remember that whoever is the champion must never lose sight of the community. The most effective voices are those that never lose sight of the community that they originally served. Thank you.
Oh, that was great. That was great. Thank you so much, all presenters there. And yes, please, a round of applause is actually welcome at this time virtually. We just wanted to get real quick. We also want to jump in right into some of our discussions here. So we really appreciate the fact that our presenters there took some time to pre-record this so that we are all keeping to time. And as you notice, we do have a healthy time left now for discussions. And I'd like to, at this point in time, bring our panelists into the panel session. And I just want to quickly introduce them one more time as they come in. Some of so you met some of them through the recorded presentations here. First of all, I'd like to introduce Lisa Tarantino, our Director for Transition and Sustainability on the LHSS project, and she also is the Regional Manager there for Latin America, the Caribbean, and Eastern Europe. Lisa, do you want to just give us a nice wave? We can see you there already. And then I'd like to introduce Luisaged Ageze. He is the Chief of Party for the Health Finance Improvement Program. He's joining us all the way from Ethiopia. We did hear there from Tiliku Yeshanu, the Health System and Governance Senior Advisor on the project. He's also on the panel as well. So feel free to send any questions his way. But Luisaged here is representing that project here on the panel. So thank you, Luisaged and Tiliku. And Doug Fountain is the Executive Director for Christian Connections for International Health, and we did hear his voice there talking about some of the commitments and all the experience there working through those networks and those connections, and we will just get into some of that a little bit in the discussion here. So thank you all again for joining this lovely panel. It's a packed one, and I want to kind of get out of the way here by talking too much. But I just wanted to get into the discussion real quick. And Lisa T, which we fondly call her, Lisa T is gonna get right into queuing us up here. So we listened to a couple of presentations here, and there's a lot packed into those 15 minutes of talk that just happened now. So what do you think are some of the key takeaways from the case studies? Like, how do these resonate with some of the promising practices that I believe we're already seeing on the local health system sustainability project? There is a lot of, there's a lot of sustainability planning that's been going on, and it's even baked into our name per se. So what do you think are some of those key takeaways that you can draw from this, some of the presentations this morning?
Thanks, Ekpenyong, and thanks to the speakers. What I'm seeing is something that's really quite exciting, that there is this focus on sustainability that I've heard in your presentations, and I feel that we are still in the process of learning that through these types of programs, but also through others, like for our project, Local Health System Sustainability Project, 19 of our countries, including Dr. Gusti's program in Peru, have a plan for sustainability that's explicit. And they're working towards this. And what I'm seeing in terms of the indicators that they're looking for and the strategies, I'm hearing some of very, very similar things from all of you. And I'll be interested to hear more with the panel discussion about your experience. That, you know, what we're looking for in our project is looking for full transition to local ownership, financing, implementation, capacity strengthening, leadership. And what I heard a lot about local leadership, local engagement, networks. I saw a lot of engaging in networks when I worked in the Caribbean in countries that were transitioning from Global Fund and PEPFAR funding for their HIV response. A lot of those local organizations really needed to pair up to, you know, to work with each other's strengths, as you discussed for the CCIH example. So we're looking at capacity at the institutional and system level. We're looking for system level functioning, political and local leadership, as I know in Ethiopia is an essential factor, and it is everywhere. Financing is important, but not always sufficient. And also that there's a policy environment, as Dr. Gusti is working on in Peru, which is a real indicator of sustainability, clearly. What we have gotten our country program leaders together and are starting to also learn a few things. And this is some of the things that I'm also hearing from all of you in these last 4 years. And what does all of this look like? So we still don't know if things are going to be sustained. We're looking for indicators of sustainability, but you know, as this whole process of these learning questions shows, is that we still need more evidence. Are these things being sustained? In the near term, what we're starting to see are continuing processes. For example, working with the government on developing the use of data for decision making. So if we were to see Ethiopia government and at all levels using data for budgeting, that, you know, that would be some evidence of sustainability. Looking at improved system functions, for example, our project in the DR, strengthening the staffing, the protocols for community-based care for HIV. Once this starts working and seeing, you know, on its own that there's an improved access to service and increased quality, that's going to be an indicator. That there are plans to continue. So, for example, again in Peru, there's an established migrant observatory, migrant and health observatory. Is that mechanism planning for their next objectives for next year? What is their plan for moving forward without a project support? And then budgeting. And for example, in Colombia, we've seen, and similar to the Ethiopia example that Lisa Good provided, that at the subnational levels, the health administrations have put into their budget for next year surveillance officers and the adequate resources that are going to be needed to continue the kind of support that LHSS provided in the context of COVID-19 and strengthening that surveillance mechanism. And then lastly, just overall health system performance. And what we have seen, and I think what I heard from the CCIH presentation, is that these system performance often includes engaging actors in a more formal way. For example, engaging the private sector in Jamaica, where we pulled in private sector actors, but starting to formalize those relationships and the way that they work together so that it's not an ad hoc, informal thing that can easily fade away. And similarly with engaging communities, I think you had a good point on the CCIH presentation that you may lose a champion, but if you've engaged the community and there are accountability mechanisms even, ideally, then that then those functions can continue to operate. And similarly in Peru, where you're looking, beyond the key stakeholder of the government, but to other actors in the system that are going to help weather changes and shocks by having them, fully engaged with their roles and responsibilities. We gathered together our programs a few months ago, and some of the lessons that we're hearing also from them is that this importance of planning from the beginning, this transition and sustainable, strengthening sustainability. And that's something I've heard from all three of you, that you want to see milestones in the system and explicit goals for local ownership. And following, the other lesson is that it's really the essential part is to follow local priorities and ensuring that we're supporting local institutions and system priorities in all of our work as development partners. Engaging the multiple stakeholders is something we heard across our 19 countries continuously. And then also that sustainability looks different in different places. That was the fourth lesson is, for example, there may be a system level impact in Peru from the policy development, but in other places, like in the CCIH example, what you're looking at is sustained capacity at the organizational level. So that's another, there's different levels and it looks different in different contexts, especially considering political context. In Ethiopia, you're looking for government leadership and commitment. In a place like Afghanistan, our work is really focusing more on local organizations and communities that are going to be taking things forward. And then the fifth lesson that we were starting to hear is that financing is essential, but not the only thing that's going to be important to make sure that system strengthening and sustainable outcomes are sustained with adequate and financing that's allocated appropriately. That these other factors such as stakeholder engagement, commitment, capacity are addressed. So I just want to thank the speakers again, and I would love to all of us get together in 2 years from now, ideally 5 years from now, and to see the real sustained outcomes of our work. But thank you.
Thank you so much there, Lisa. So somehow I even feel a round of applause is worthy at this point in time. But yes, you did highlight a lot of different things here, and I think our panelists are ready to unpack some of those. You mentioned 5 main things, and I'm going to recap them a little later because I think they are very, very important, and we realized some of those from our evidence gap map. But I have a couple of questions that came into the chat. But before I go into those, there are a couple of there's just some that the panelists here are prepared to kind of answer. So the first one here is Lisa mentioned some of this very cursorily, Paulina, and I'm going to be coming to you straight up here. But when we are talking about champions, and champions is a word, it's something that we talk about all the time. Local champions for advocacy. How did you kind of identify and engage a variety of champions to ensure that critical, that sustainability bill, the one you talked about there, the one you referenced, that was really important for the engagement of migrants, what were kind of the key facilitators or barriers for that process? What would you say more about how you identified and identified and and engaged a variety of champions for this? I'm sorry, and Paulina, you are muted. If you just a little reminder. Okay, good.
Good morning, yes. Okay, thanks, Epignon. Well, I think that there's a lot of things that facilitated us to identify champions, stakeholders in the country to move forward this bill that we were talking about. The first thing I think is that the team we have has a very deep knowledge and experience within the health sector. So with such a teams, there you have someone who knows people inside and outside the public sector and can know who is who in the space. Other thing that was very helpful for us is that the mission was very supportive for establishing relationships with other agencies involved in HIV and migrants. Actually, the mission gave us a lot of contacts when we began the project. No? And USAID and UNAIDS have a long-standing collaboration relationship. Another thing that we have to take into account is the USAID brand, because it's not you who are knocking the door. It's the project, the USAID project. And that is important also when you want someone to answer your request. No, you have to identify champions in the country, in the issue, in the topic you are working in. Well, if you are working with HIV, as us, UNAIDS should be a natural contact, but then there are other actors in the country. Basically, you know someone, you contact someone who knows someone, and so on. We began in this with a core group. Just other thing is you should engage a stakeholder from the beginning. We did that with the health system assessment, and then they were part of the process. They not only were convened to present the results, to present what was the health system assessment. They were involved from the beginning in the methodology. They gave feedback there. They feedback for result. They discuss recommendations. So they were part of the process. And there's something that is very important when we convene the group, is that in a country as ours that has a lot of political instability, the Ministry of Health is always solving crises. And they don't have time to discuss deeply things. And even when they have spaces where they can discuss and organize the collaboration of agencies, they have no time to convene. So people is eager to have a space to discuss the problems they are facing or the objectives they want to achieve. So that was this group for a lot of organizations, no? And very important thing for us was we have a common goal, no? We have a common goal about accesses of migrants to public health insurance. And then we began with a core group. We began with USAID and UNAIDS, and then we involve others. We engage others because yes, NGOs that was working previously with us, and then someone knows someone and calls someone and so on. So at the end, we end with all these institutions. We have to take into account that not all respond in the same way. No, some of organizations didn't join. No, they were interested, but they didn't have time or whatever. No, and now other organizations are engaging us in their activities. No, we just received an invitation from IOM to coordinate an event about migrants. No, and as a summary, you have to ask who convene. You have to knock doors. You have to wait at an appointment. You have to explain. You have to listen. You have to invite, and so on. That's what I can say.
No, great, great. That is a great response there, Paulina. There is I'm just impressed by what you did say there. It's almost like a snowballing approach, you know.
Yes.
It's almost like what we do sometimes in research, where we, you know, especially in qualitative research. But in this kind of snowballing approach, there's an intention with it. There's a lot of patience that goes with it, and there's also the place where we tend to, and you mentioned a key thing here, which is creating a collaborative space that
Yes.
sometimes the Ministry of Health are kind of too distracted to do. They're involved in their day to day. They don't have those opportunities, and implementing partners can help create that kind of discussion space that brings people together. And from then, you know, we can begin to identify those type of champions. And because of what you said and the whole interactive and networking type thing, I'd like to go to Doug right quickly, you know, because you present this type of approach similar to what we're talking about here from the public sector, but yours is more about some of that private sector, faith-based type organization type, you know, a program. Uh, but I wanted to hone in real quickly on the practical organizational support. So you present a unique perspective of that practicality of that support to facilitate skill and sustainability. How has that been operationalized? I mean, you know, we're talking about planning for sustainability here. So what is your experience there? How has the response been to this practical support? And what does that even mean, if you can unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, or at least to try. And thank you. I have to say again, thank you for hosting this important event. I'm learning a lot from my colleagues, and even seeing from the questions that are popping up, and Lisa's summary. I'm just gaining a lot from this. So thank you. In terms of operationalizing this, as faith networks, it's important to remember that the majority of the world do belong to a major religion. In fact, in our work, we find that faith actors are influencers of the values, the attitudes, behaviors of communities. They've earned their place of trust in communities and predate development programs. In fact, they'll be around long after any of our particular development projects are there. So I think they already own that sense of we are part of the community. We are the community, and instead of saying we serve in or we will work with, they say we are a part of the community. They're also scaled providers of community-based and facility-based health services, and that's important to bear in mind. That, for instance, we've done some mapping in 17 countries in sub-Saharan Africa and documented over 8,300 health facilities, health programs, and training institutions just through 22 faith-based health networks in these 17 sub-Saharan Africa countries. And so we think, how do we support them? How do we come alongside them? So operationalizing, you know, our network is over half made up of organizations that are only based in low and middle income countries, not just international organizations trying to work someplace. So we think, how do we come alongside them? And in a way, our network is wired for local partnerships, and that really has helped. Now, how has the response been? I love that question. Uh, we did mention in the case study that we offer capacity building sessions, discussions on topics like monitoring and evaluation, business development, that type of thing. We also provide a lot of direct support. You know, for instance, I've had the opportunity to review bylaws and constitutions of some of our members. Our staff have gotten involved with reviewing financial management and HR policies. These are very, very practical things that people need. And that one-on-one coaching is a bit resource intensive, but it's meant to help listen to what's happening and then help bring about change. And that's what I'm really wanting to get to here. There's probably a bias, right? If you ask somebody, did you appreciate that CCIH brought resources to help you? People will say, yes, of course, that, you know, thank you for that. The proof, though, is in the change that comes about. People can appreciate it and be positive, but do they start to make change? Here's a key point for this. We have to stop thinking binary. We have to stop thinking that we delivered a training and therefore now they're a strong organization in that area. Or we provided a coaching session and now their problem is fixed. We have to stop thinking of that way and start thinking about skill and building muscle. Okay, you learn over time how to build that muscle, how to build that skill. You do it through repetition. You just keep getting better. You keep articulating the same points over time, and then you can start to see organizations improve. We've found that with quite a number of our partners, not just our 30 by 30 partners, but many others, when we're with them over time, those skills start to get stronger, and then you start to see real change happen. So the appreciation is there. The test is going to be what change we can see.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much there, Doug. I think we're gonna still come back a little bit into that piece, but I think you're right. There will be there long before we go. You know, there's something about those the unique networks and the unique structures or connections that are already there in the community that we need to kind of build on moving on here. I want to swing right now to Ethiopia and you know, Lisa, again, this is a long, you know, we've had a long presence per se on the ground, you know, trying to do this work with health finance improvements, and more likely in the thinking and in planning for sustainability and institutionalization. How did you monitor this progress over time? I mean, did in the face of, you know, from one program to another, from one iteration to another, you know, because we know that in the evidence gap map, you know, one of the identified gaps we have seen is monitoring, and Lisa did allude to it somehow when she was talking about the kind of milestones and or there's a paucity of that in the space. So how did you know, what challenges did you face actually when you're trying to monitor this progress over time? And Lisa, again, you're still on mute if you don't mind. Just hit the mute button there. And now but it's still on mute there. Okay, yeah, your video is back on now, but your mute button is still on. Yes, thank you. That's great.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Ping. I think it's a very good question, and as you rightly said, we have been on the ground for the last how many years now? Almost 2 decades, and right from the start, although the thinking was to sort of also work on sustainability and institutionalization, it didn't happen as we envisaged. So the last part, which is the health financing improvement program piece, was basically devoted to institutionalization. So one of the challenges that we saw was, although we were managing to sort of implement reforms, you know, with government counterparts, institutionalization piece was not that strong, and I think we had to plan for institutionalization in and of itself. So, as indicated by Tedliku, the plan for institutionalization document clearly identified a number of issues. One is the roles and responsibilities of critical actors like Minister of Health and regional actors like Regional Health Bureau, of course, USAID Health Finance Improvement Program. And we have also managed to sort of identify financing source for the institutionalization piece. And we have also clear implementation timeline, of course, over the last 5 years. And then we had also a clear monitoring mechanism where we had to also indicate monitoring indicators to ensure the commitment of stakeholders. So I think in doing that, what we did was basically we used a number of interventions. One is what we call supportive supervisions, okay, which we like every quarter. And in fact, we used to have performance review meetings every time. So we had to sort of review our progress, you know, what we have learned over the last 1 year or so, depending on the planning year, and then, you know, share that for implementers. So I think in terms of monitoring, we were very clear, because that was part of the whole planning process over the last 5 years. In fact, there were a number of challenges in that also. That's the most important thing. we had to undertake repeated advocacy to get the buy-in from regional health bureaus because, you know, they were kind of dependent on us. They were still looking for some kind of, you know, support over a number of years. You know. But we thought that because a project is a project, it has to stop somewhere. And there has to be sustainability and institutionalization in place. So we have to repeatedly advocate that. And there is also, we had a lengthy process of approving the newly established structure by the Civil Service Bureau because as it was mentioned by Teluku, we had what we call system elements that we need to put in place. The first one is to put the organizational structure that would take the responsibility to implement the reforms and operational procedures, meaning the legal frameworks that would be important to implement the reforms also. And the third piece was the capacity building element. We used to do that, but again, if it has to be institutionalized, there has to be a local capacity to undertake that. And we found what we call CPDs, continuous professional development, and universities and other actors that will take up that activity. And in fact, the last one was the establishment of healthcare financing technical working group because the healthcare financing reforms should be a standing agenda in the health system discussions. So for that to happen, definitely an important thing for the system was to have a structure, meaning a technical working group that would work on a permanent basis. So I think that's what we were trying to do, but we had a lengthy process in the approval of the structure. And the other one was, of course, the budget shortage to hire and fill all the established positions. Okay, that was again another problem. In fact, in the the last 2 years, we have had restructuring of the regional administration system. Like we had a number of regions, added to the already existing regional administrations. So that was also a challenge partly. And of course, as you know, the security situation in the northern part of Ethiopia was another reason. And due to that, we didn't manage to nationalize healthcare finance reforms in Tigray region, for example. And of course, because of the security situation, even USAID was a little bit hard in terms of allocating the necessary budget for our work. So those are the kind of challenges that we face. Other than that, we were very systematic in terms of monitoring our activities as we had to plan every year as part of the work plan that we used to submit for USAID.
I see.
Thanks.
I see. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate what you said there at the beginning about sometimes that's the sustainability element is not factored into the planning at the beginning, but you did end up there to say that there's specific steps that are taken along the way, identifying specific institutions and working with them, and there are milestones that are evidence that the sustainability profile of all of these engagements is promising. I think that's kind of one of the things that we may need to kind of write up a little bit more in that way. There needs to be more evidence for that. It's time for the Q&A session now, and we do already have a massive a massive throng of questions that have come in already, and I know on the chat has been busy. And one of the unique things about the questions that I can see so far that they are packed. They are they are packed questions. They are loaded questions. I want to admit right now off the bat that we may not be able to deal or answer or field all of them in this call, but we promise that we're going to get them answered and we're going to send them out with the rest of the resources on this as part of this this webinar. But I wanted to direct my first question to you, Paulina, and my apologies there for skipping when welcoming the panelists for skipping you there. Somehow I was trying to mix it up and interrupt you, but we already heard from you right real quick in your presentation. And this first question goes to you regards to if there's a buzzword, this whole of society approach is a buzzword that we development partners always field in, all the time. I know you spent some time talking about this, but what does that whole of society approach really mean for sustainability planning in Peru? Like, what difference does it really make? If you don't mind, in just very quick 30 seconds there.
Very quickly, Pignon, we are a project. we are going to, we have a beginning date and an end date, no? And we are going to leave the country as a
Yeah.
project. So it is important to involve stakeholders that are permanent in the country, because as we were talking about, you the Ministry of Health is in a lot, the government in general is in managing crisis,
Mhm.
and as they say, the urgent doesn't give room for the important. So if you want to promote or facilitate a change in any area of the health system, you have to involve other cooperants, other cooperation agencies, NGO that are in permanent relationship with the Ministry of Health.
Mm.
I think that one policy we have had as a point here is collaboration, 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 collaboration.
Mm.
Yes, because there are a lot of knowledge and willing to improve in other
I see.
organizations.
Oh, thank you so much. It just feels like right there, and this is something that Doug had kind of alluded to. There's no sector that we should lose sight of as we're trying to pull in, as we're trying to establish these collaborations. And I think you're totally right. The whole of society is indeed whole of society.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the beneficiaries at the end of the day, all of the work that we do it, so what groups represent them, and I think that's one of the things that I'm gleaning out of your space there. And the health systems mapping exercise that I think we did and the project earlier on did help identify all the major players. So I think it's a very good thing that it is good to do, and maybe it's a good way to get participation in by getting them involved at the beginning. So Doug, there are a couple of questions that have come in the chat just for you. So I'm hoping you have a nice plate there, and I'm hoping that you can take two of them right away off the bat. One is, what form do the commitments take? So I'm sure that's going to be a quick one. And the second thing is, what are some of the lessons from COVID-19 that have strengthened your work? I mean, with CCIH, especially reaching the vulnerable people that were focused in your presentations. And I think that question kind of came in there from one of our, I think it was Joyce Murithi. Yeah, so please, if you don't mind addressing those two quick questions, how did the MOH buy into that, if you can say it? Yes.
Yeah, I'll start with the nature of the commitments. They're written commitments. Our organizations have to apply to become a commitment maker, and we review them to see if the commitment that they're making actually makes sense. There's no financial buy-in that they have to bring. Of course, they roughly fall into two categories. Some come with their own resources. Some are looking for resources. That's still part of what they're having to do. But the commitment is, we're going to see this change play out over time. So it's a written commitment. One of the, I love the question about COVID and what's happened, especially with vulnerable populations. COVID strained all of our partners, all of us globally. What's remarkable is that most of the commitment makers actually came into 30 by 30 during COVID. I think what COVID did is it underscored the urgency of systems level thinking. I think it reinforced that organizations might struggle if they're just doing things on their own. So that was important. We think that strengthening relationships between all the stakeholders, kind of like what we're just talking about, the faith communities, religious leaders, NGOs, research institutions, and the ministries of health, is critical. One thing about the private, nonprofit, and faith-based space is they may run facilities or run programs that are government programs, or be de facto government programs in some places, but they usually exist in some ways parallel to governments. There still must always be cohesion. There must be a level of strong relationship and at least awareness of what each other's doing. And never would you want to see government planning leave out the private nonprofit sector, just like you would never want to see private nonprofits doing something that is inconsistent with government policy. We encourage honest dialogue and knowledge exchange. And I guess my last point on that is, engaging the faith community shouldn't be an afterthought. It needs to be included as they're critical informants and decision makers in everything from vaccines to maternal and child health planning, all of that. So involve the faith community early, please. Thanks.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that response. And I'm going to keep going as much as possible. Lisa, there is a question here that I think you might be better placed to reflect on. And I think that that came from Paul Afeda from ADRA in Yemen. Thank you so much for joining us there. Um, so what are the possible sustainability approaches in community health models in humanitarian and emergency settings? If you don't mind reflecting real quick, I know when you were talking about some of our work there on LHSS, you mentioned something about Colombia. So maybe chime in real quick, and then Paulina, you may be able to take on something from Peru as well in response to that quick question.
Very quickly, so humanitarian and emergency responses by their very nature are not meant to be entirely sustainable, right? But there are two strategies that you can consider when in that context for sustainability. One is, I would say, and this is what we've done in Colombia, but also other countries around the world with USAID support, is consider how can we build local capacity to sustain the ability to react to an emergency, for example, for COVID-19. So in Colombia, we mobilized surveillance support in 40 of their territories, but at the same time, documented the process, ensured that those surveillance officers were at the levels of, types of people or qualifications that would fit for them to potentially work for the local government's health administration. And by documenting it and ensuring that it was right fitted, that whole approach to the Ministry of Health strategies, to local health administration strategies, we were able to hand over that sort of way of responding quickly in the context of a health emergency. So that would be one approach I would say is document how you're doing it and work together with local stakeholders and make sure that they have that and they can incorporate it into their own standard operating procedures. The second strategy that I'll just quickly is to consider, when does a humanitarian response need to pivot to a more longer term system strengthening response? And that I would argue is the case in many countries in Latin America, where they're seeing influxes of Venezuelan migrants that are just, it's not slowing down. They're going to be there for a while. So it's time to consider sustainable approaches to integrating them into the health system in that way.
So great, great response there. I'm also worried about the when. When is the transition? When is the transition from emergency to systems type response? There is a critical factor there, but I think you highlight an important part about documenting and working and collaborating. Paulina, any quick thought about this one?
Okay, I think I have no much to add to what Lisa said, but if you ask when, you have to wait that the emergency decreases, like we see in COVID. You cannot institutionalize organization or help or aid when you have the crisis, the big crisis, no? But I would not add anything else because humanitarian is humanitarian. It's not prepared to be. So you have to focus on preparedness for future emergencies, no? And that's what we have done with COVID here.
Yes. I see. There's something about a transformative capacity of the system, and I think it does do well to reflect on what are some of the experiences from emergencies that can be translated to help shore up or support systems. Something is hitting my mind now about some kind of evaluation of COVID-19 work and how some of the health systems approaches have helped to establish that. I'm sure as we talk and as we work with that, there's going to be a lot more evidence with that moving forward. All right, so there's another question here that I think we can take maybe one or two more before we wrap up today. We are getting close to the end of this, and this is from Parvez. There's something about advanced economies. I don't think we all of us, this is something we can really address fully at this question, but I just want your thought. Any one of you on the panel, if you can remember the question here. There's something about advanced economies that have built sustainable health systems. Isn't there any benefit from examining their models and journeys and helping us to do this? Parvez is trying to say here that why can't we just draw from existing sustainable health systems? So any quick thoughts about this? Anyone? Just feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. I don't want to put any one of you on the spot. Yes, Lisa, please.
I can say that I think that happens. There's often, study tours that go to Germany or the UK, and there is that. And I know, for example, Ukraine is modeling different reforms after Spain and the UK, and et cetera. But, one thing that there's a limit to that. And also one of the things that I've heard from all of the speakers and that I've heard from our teams is that when you're thinking about sustainability, some of the challenges are political changes, unavoidable issues in the environment, loss of political support. And so those kinds of things, not so much, which is interesting, the traditional places where development assistance focuses, which is on capacity and ensuring local financing, right? But the actual sustainable, challenges are about local buy-in and local engagement, local mechanisms and politics. So anyway, I would say, there's really a limit.
Oh, great. Thanks, Lisa. Anybody else wants to jump in real quick before we take real quick closing?
Flip?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think what I would like to say is we can learn as much as we can from advanced economies. Definitely, they must have traversed it, and they had a lot of experiences, definitely. But at the end of the day, context matters. So we cannot emulate everything, but we can adapt those important things that we can learn from them.
Exactly. I think you're right. Adapt is the word. Emulate is sometimes the distraction, but adapt is the word. Okay. We have so many more questions and there are comments in the chat, but I want to take 1 minute here to highlight one or two quick comments, and then everybody's going to have 30 seconds to just drop a quick advice to you. So there's one thing here from Jamie Chang in the USAID mission in Peru that references the fact that identifying allies, that whole of society question, but identifying allies that and individuals and institutions that genuinely share the objective, especially where that objective fits within his natural role, is a good thing. And I just wanted to highlight that because, identifying champions and allies, this has to be an alignment. And thanks for raising that point up. And Ratna Sari just talks about the fact that pandemics and developing planning and budgeting documents are some of the challenges. It appears in Indonesia. You are totally right. There are so many there's so many problems that are similar across the board. So these types of discussions or fora really helps people learn from each other. So thank you so much for chiming in there. And there's this last quick one here about from Uganda. Tony did talk about where it looks like there's another long implementation, a 10-year roadmap for health supply chain. It was possible because of stakeholder engagement, government buy-in. There was systems thinking and systems strengthening beyond just the health system. So it looks like this long presence kind of bled into other sectors here. So I really thank you so much for that addition. Now to the panelists, if you were to advise USAID or any other development partner on designing projects that meaningfully incorporate this planning for sustainability concept we've discussed today, what would be your one main recommendation? You have 30 seconds. I'm going to go straight to you first, Doug.
Great.
One advice, one recommendation.
Engage faith leaders early, middle, and late in the process. By that, I mean, don't wait for funding program and figure out how to contract with them. Get them involved in conceiving what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, design the programs and see if they're working. I think we could do that do localization better if we pay attention to that sort of framework. Early, middle, and late. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Lisa? your 30-second
Sorry. Yep. But yeah.
recommendation
Sorry.
pitch.
Just quickly to consider and prioritize not just the capacity strengthening and the resources, but to look at the governance aspects of engaging local stakeholders, fostering local leadership, accountability mechanisms. Those are the kinds of things where, if not maintained and strengthened, the financing can fall away. The capacity strengthening may not be supported to further, strengthen the system without development partner support. And just quickly, also, as all of these, programs started, is to continue with the systems thinking approach, which really, goes well with that emphasis. Over.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thanks so much, Lisa. Lisa Ged, your 30 seconds.
Okay, I think straight what I would say is it's good to start planning sustainability right from the start of the project implementation and bring all the stakeholders on board as early. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. You saved us some time there. Dr. Paulina Gusti, your last 30 seconds.
Okay, I was saying that you should collaborate. You should leverage resources from local stakeholders, learn from them, enhance your results, and don't forget that they are going to remain in the country when you are not there. Thanks.
Oh, great stuff. I appreciate that. We've come to the end of this webinar, and I just really want us, if you don't mind, do a virtual clap there for all of our panelists and all of the questions that came through. I have learned a lot from this, and I hope you have too. We will be sharing the recording. We'll be sharing the presentations. Thank you everybody for your virtual clap there. We appreciate you to take. There's going to be a webinar. Sorry, last slide, if you don't mind. There's going to be a webinar, another seminar planned for September, October. Details are forthcoming. Please look out for it. And then the next LHSS webinar is on September 26th, where we're going to be talking about financing quality across the health sector using the national quality policies and strategies to move from planning to action. So we're still going to be talking about this whole planning for sustainability, and in this particular case, financing quality is the element that we're going to be honing in on. You would be receiving a post-event evaluation right after this. It would also come with the slides and the link and some of the high-level takeaways. Please feel free to share that across your networks, and please feel free to ask us any more questions. Some of the questions we didn't get to today, we will pull them together. Our panelists are available to still continue to answer some of those and share their thoughts. And please continue to engage with us, and we hope to see you at the next time. See you next month, and then at the next webinars as we have. Any questions, reach out to us. I remain your faithful moderator, Dr. Ekbereng Ekanem, LHSS. See you next time. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.